I refuse to fly with that man on board. The captain's voice echoed through gate C-12, cutting through the pre-boarding chatter like a knife. 186 passengers turned to stare at a well-dressed black man, clutching his business class ticket, his hands trembling slightly. Then airport security approached, placing a hard plastic card on the security tray. The embossed letters caught the fluorescent light chief executive officer, who wasn't qualified to fly today. Take a guess. Comment what state you're watching from and subscribe to Black Stories Box, because this plot twist hits harder than free coffee in the first-class lounge. I'm Marcus, and I've been working airport security for 12 years. I've seen everything from emotional breakdowns to celebrity meltdowns, but what happened that Tuesday morning at Gate C-12 changed how I view power privilege and the thin line between safety and prejudice. Let me tell you about the day a pilot's discrimination met its match in the most unexpected way possible. This story will stay with you long after you hear it, and it might just change how you see the world around you. The morning started like any other at Denver International Airport. Flight SH-447 to Atlanta was preparing for departure when Captain Bradley Morrison stepped out of the jet bridge, his silver hair perfectly styled, his uniform crisp and commanding. The man had 22 years of flying experience, a spotless safety record, and the kind of confidence that comes with commanding respect in cockpits across the country. Without any warning whatsoever, he pointed directly at a passenger in the business class boarding line, a well-dressed black man in an expensive charcoal suit who appeared to be in his late 30s. That passenger presents a clear and immediate security risk to this aircraft, and everyone aboard Captain Morrison announced, his voice carrying across the entire gate area, loud enough for half the waiting passengers to hear clearly. His tone was authoritative, final, and left no room for discussion. I'm invoking my federal authority under aviation safety regulations to remove him from this flight immediately. The man he pointed at remained remarkably calm, almost eerily composed in the face of such public humiliation. Later I'd learn his name was David Richardson, and his extraordinary composure in that volatile moment would make perfect sense given what we'd discover about his background. But right then, watching him stand perfectly still while chaos erupted around him like a gathering storm, I felt that familiar knot forming deep in my stomach, the one that always told me something was very, very wrong with the situation, unfolding before my eyes. Captain Morrison, what specific security concern do you have regarding this particular passenger? Asked Jennifer Walsh, the gate agent on duty. She was young, maybe 27, with auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun, and the kind of sharp, quick thinking that comes from years of dealing with difficult passengers, unexpected flight delays, and constant corporate pressure on a daily basis. Her voice remained steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Multiple suspicious behavioral patterns that warrant immediate attention. Excessive observation of cabin safety procedures and crew movements. Electronic devices that require immediate and thorough inspection before any boarding can proceed. Morrison replied curtly, his tone suggesting his decision was completely final and absolutely non-negotiable under any circumstances. I moved closer to the developing situation, my supervisor instincts automatically kicking into high gear after more than a decade of experience reading people and situations. David Richardson hadn't done anything remotely suspicious that I could observe from my strategic position near the gate desk. He'd been quietly reading what appeared to be financial reports on a high-end tablet, a completely common sight in any airport lounge or gate area, especially in the business class section. His only apparent crime seemed to be existing while black in the first-class boarding area. An elderly white man further back in the boarding line suddenly spoke up, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of experience and hard-earned moral authority. Sir, I served 3 tours in Vietnam and lost too many good friends because of dangerous assumptions and racial prejudice. Don't let that same poison happen again on American soil today. The man slowly introduced himself as Frank Thornton, a decorated veteran whose weathered, age-spotted hands shook slightly as he spoke with passionate conviction, born from decades of witnessing injustice. His words carried undeniable weight that made several passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly becoming aware they were witnessing something much more significant than a routine flight delay or standard security procedure. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Riley Park had quietly started live-streaming the entire incident on her phone, her teenage instincts correctly sensing this was potentially newsworthy content. I noticed her viewer count jumping rapidly from dozens to hundreds as words spread like wildfire across social media platforms and messaging apps. The hashtag number GateC12 was already beginning to trend locally throughout the Denver metropolitan area. Captain Morrison seemed completely oblivious to the growing attention and comprehensive digital documentation happening around him. I am personally and legally responsible for the safety of every single person on this aircraft. If I have any legitimate concerns about any passenger's intentions, behavior, or potential threat level, I have the full legal authority granted by federal regulations to remove them immediately and without appeal. David Richardson finally spoke for the first time since the confrontation began, his voice steady, professional, and remarkably controlled despite the obvious stress of the situation. Captain, I'm completely happy to cooperate with any additional security screening procedures you feel are necessary for everyone's peace of mind and safety. That measured response told me everything I needed to know about this man's character. Most passengers in his humiliating situation would be angry, defensive, flustered, or loudly demanding explanations and supervisors. David's supernatural, calm, and cooperative attitude suggested he was either remarkably composed under extreme pressure or he knew something important that the rest of us didn't understand yet. The situation escalated dramatically when my direct supervisor, Captain Robert Hayes, of airport security arrived, carrying a sealed manila envelope marked with multiple official stamps reading emergency authorization, time-sensitive, federal priority. The envelope bore several security seals and official markings having come directly from the airport's main administrative office through secure channels bearing stamps and classifications I'd only seen during serious federal security incidents or high-level emergencies. Mr. Richardson, Captain Hayes said formally, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone with 20 years in federal law enforcement and airport security management. I need to officially verify some important credentials that have been brought to our immediate attention through secure channels. He carefully broke the multiple official seals and removed what appeared to be an executive identification card made of high-quality plastic with embedded security features. The card caught the bright overhead fluorescent lights as he deliberately placed it on the security verification tray for everyone present to clearly see. Even from my position approximately 10 feet away, I could clearly read the embossed gold text, Acting Chief Executive Officer, Richardson Holdings International. The entire gate area fell into complete stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the industrial carpet below our feet. Passengers stopped their conversations, mid-sentence children stopped fussing, and even the constant airport announcements seemed to pause in recognition of the moment's significance. Captain Morrison's face drained of all color, leaving him looking pale, shaken, and suddenly much older than his 53 years. That has to be some kind of sophisticated fake identification. Some sort of elaborate intimidation tactic or carefully orchestrated bluff designed to manipulate this situation and undermine my authority. But Captain Hayes was already on his secure radio, methodically running 3 separate independent verification checks through different federal databases and security systems. First, he contacted the Airport Control Tower's security division directly. Then he called the airline's corporate headquarters through secure lines. Finally, he accessed the TSA Federal Identification Database using his security clearance. Each confirmation came back with identical, unambiguous results. David Richardson had been officially activated as acting CEO under emergency corporate protocols exactly 93 minutes earlier due to a serious cybersecurity incident affecting the airline's main computer servers and threatening operational security. Riley's livestream viewer count had jumped dramatically to over 2,000 active viewers and climbing rapidly. The comments section was flowing faster than she could possibly read them, with people sharing the stream across multiple social media platforms, news, websites, and messaging applications. The reach was expanding exponentially with each passing minute. Sir Captain Hayes addressed Captain Morrison directly and formally, his tone, leaving no room for doubt or argument. This passenger has been successfully verified through 3 completely independent federal channels and security databases. His executive credentials are absolutely legitimate, current, and carry significant corporate authority. Jennifer Walsh looked like she desperately wanted to disappear into the floor beneath her feet. She kept nervously glancing at her company-issued phone, where I could see urgent messages flooding in from the airline's PR department and corporate communications team. Carefully crafted messages that would later become crucial, evidence of attempted corporate damage control and narrative manipulation. Frank Thornton shook his head slowly, with obvious disgust and disappointment. Son, I've seen this exact same prejudice before during my military service in Southeast Asia. When you automatically assume the worst about people based purely on how they look or the color of their skin, you usually end up looking like a complete fool and damaging innocent lives. The crowd around Gate C-12 had grown significantly larger as word spread throughout the terminal. Passengers from nearby gates had noticed the unusual commotion and growing media attention, and many were actively recording everything on their smartphones from multiple angles. What had started as a seemingly routine flight delay was rapidly becoming something much larger, more significant, and potentially historic in its implications. David Richardson maintained his remarkable calm demeanor throughout the entire lengthy verification process, never raising his voice or showing signs of anger despite the obvious humiliation. When Captain Hayes officially confirmed his identity and corporate position, David simply nodded respectfully and said with genuine professionalism, "Thank you for following proper verification procedures, Captain Hayes. Professional process and due diligence are all I ever asked for in this situation." While Captain Morrison struggled to process the shocking revelation and its implications for his career, Jennifer Walsh found herself dealing with a completely different but equally serious crisis. Anonymous messages had started appearing in local social media groups and news outlets showing damaging screenshots of internal airline communications that someone with high-level company access had deliberately leaked to the public in real time. The leaked internal messages revealed that airline PR staff had already prepared multiple standard corporate responses for passenger disruption incidents. Carefully crafted, legally vetted responses that bore absolutely no resemblance to what was actually happening in real time at Gate C-12. The communications showed they'd planned to publicly blame David for being uncooperative, disruptive, and threatening despite overwhelming video evidence from multiple sources, clearly showing the exact opposite behavior and complete cooperation. Riley Park's live stream had evolved into the unofficial but comprehensive record of the unfolding events, becoming a primary source for journalists and legal observers. Her natural teenage energy and completely unfiltered commentary style had attracted engaged viewers from across the entire country and internationally. "This is absolutely insane, you guys," she whispered urgently into her phone camera, her voice filled with genuine disbelief. "The pilot literally just tried to discriminate against the actual CEO of the company he works for. Like, how do you even begin to explain that level of irony and stupidity?" Captain Hayes was now actively coordinating with federal aviation authorities according to strict protocols and legal requirements. FAA regulations required immediate documentation and thorough investigation when any discrimination complaints involved active flight crew members, especially when incidents were comprehensively documented by multiple independent sources and credible witnesses. He began systematically sealing crucial evidence, securing the captain's communication logs, official passenger manifests, boarding records, and all of the gate's security footage from multiple camera angles covering the entire incident. Captain Morrison's troubled past was starting to catch up with him in a very public way that couldn't be contained or managed. Anonymous tips to investigative journalists led to public records searches revealing 2 previous formal discrimination complaints filed against him over the past 5 years by passengers of color. Both serious cases had been quietly settled by the airline through generous financial settlements with strict non-disclosure agreements, keeping the incidents completely out of public view and media coverage while allowing Morrison to continue flying. The pilots' union representative Thomas Crawford arrived to assess the rapidly deteriorating situation and protect his members' interests. His primary job was to protect union members from unfair treatment and corporate retaliation, but even he looked distinctly uncomfortable as he reviewed the mounting evidence against Morrison. "Brad," he said quietly to Captain Morrison, pulling him aside for a private conversation, "this doesn't look good at all. The documentation is rock solid, and there are far too many credible witnesses with video evidence." Frank Thornton had naturally become an unofficial spokesperson for the increasingly angry and vocal passengers. "I didn't serve my country overseas and lose friends in combat so that fellow Americans could be treated as second-class citizens in their own airports," he told anyone within earshot, his voice carrying the moral authority of someone who'd sacrificed for his principles. His powerful words resonated deeply with other passengers, many of whom began sharing their own personal experiences with travel discrimination and racial profiling in airports and other transportation hubs. The airline's corporate crisis response team was scrambling desperately behind the scenes, trying to control a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond their ability to manage. They'd hastily issued a preliminary public statement about minor technical delays and routine security procedures, but social media users and journalists were already systematically comparing their sanitized official story to the detailed real-time documentation from Riley's stream and dozens of other passenger recordings from multiple angles and perspectives. David Richardson remained the calm eye of the growing storm, professional, controlled, and seemingly completely unsurprised by the chaotic situation unfolding around him. His behavior suggested this wasn't his first encounter with discrimination, and he'd learned how to handle such situations with dignity and strategic thinking. When local news reporters began arriving at the gate with cameras and microphones, he politely declined all interview requests, but made one carefully measured public statement, I believe firmly, in due process, and letting the documented facts speak for themselves. The truth has a way of emerging when people are watching. The complete truth began emerging when investigative journalists quickly uncovered detailed information about Richardson Holdings International and David's extensive corporate connections throughout the aviation industry. David wasn't just any CEO or business executive. His investment company was the majority stakeholder in several major regional airlines, including owning significant controlling interest in the very airline whose pilot was attempting to remove him from the flight based solely on racial prejudice. Sarah Connor, the airline's experienced crisis management director, arrived with a full team of corporate lawyers and PR specialists, all looking grim and carrying briefcases full of damage control strategies. Their carefully planned strategy to quietly resolve the situation and minimize media coverage collapsed entirely when they realized the true scope of David's corporate influence and the viral nature of the incident spreading across social media platforms and traditional news outlets. Captain Morrison's defense began systematically falling apart under professional scrutiny and fact-checking. Detailed flight logs spanning his entire career showed he had never once filed official safety concerns about passengers carrying electronic devices, reading materials, or exhibiting the behaviors he claimed to find suspicious. His communication records revealed a disturbing pattern of conducting longer, more intensive security checks, specifically for passengers of color, a discriminatory pattern. The airline had previously overlooked, minimized, or actively chosen to ignore to avoid controversy. The leaked internal communications painted a deeply troubling picture of systematic institutional issues within the company culture. Multiple flight attendants reported being explicitly instructed by supervisors to support crew decisions regardless of circumstances or evidence, and to avoid questioning pilot authority even in obviously problematic situations. Gate agents described consistent pressure from management to avoid challenging pilot requests, even when those requests seemed clearly inappropriate, potentially discriminatory, or legally questionable. Riley's livestream had become a genuine social media phenomenon, with over 50,000 concurrent viewers and major national news outlets beginning to pick up and broadcast the story on television networks. Her authentic teenage perspective and completely unfiltered commentary provided a raw, honest authenticity that traditional professional news coverage often lacks due to corporate constraints and editorial considerations. David Richardson's impressive background became public knowledge through rapid internet research and professional networking sites. He'd built his successful company from absolutely nothing, systematically overcoming decades of institutional discrimination throughout the aviation industry, while building relationships and proving his competence. His remarkable success hadn't been handed to him through family connections or privilege. It was earned through persistent hard work, exceptional intelligence, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to excellence despite countless obstacles and setbacks. Frank Thornton's distinguished military service record also emerged through veteran databases and military archives. He'd been officially decorated for exceptional valor during combat operations in Vietnam, but had also personally witnessed the devastating effects of racial prejudice within military ranks during a turbulent period in American history. His intervention at Gate C12 wasn't spontaneous emotion, it was the deliberate action of a man who'd seen discrimination destroy lives and careers and was absolutely determined not to let it happen again on his watch. The airline's stock price began fluctuating wildly as breaking news of the incident spread across financial networks and trading platforms. Concerned investors were asking increasingly hard questions about corporate culture, discrimination, policies, management, oversight, and potential massive legal liabilities that could affect profitability. The financial implications of the crisis were rapidly becoming as significant as the moral, legal, and public relations consequences. Thomas Crawford found himself in an impossible professional position that tested his principles. His union duty was to protect Captain Morrison from unfair treatment and corporate retaliation, but the overwhelming evidence against his member was becoming undeniable even to loyal supporters. The union's own official policies explicitly prohibited discrimination and required members to uphold professional standards, creating a serious conflict between individual member advocacy and organizational values. The confrontation reached its dramatic peak when David Richardson made his first comprehensive public statement since the incident began, choosing his moment carefully for maximum impact. Standing confidently near Gate C12, surrounded by passengers, media representatives, airport officials, and security personnel, he spoke with the quiet but unmistakable authority of someone completely accustomed to command leadership and high-stakes decision-making. "I want to be absolutely clear about something important," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the crowded gate area without being raised or aggressive. "I'm not here seeking a personal apology or individual satisfaction for this humiliation. I'm here because this exact same discrimination happens every single day to people who don't have my resources, platform, corporate influence, or legal protection. Today, we have a rare opportunity to address systematic discrimination in a completely public, transparent way that could benefit countless others." Captain Morrison backed into an increasingly desperate corner with his career and reputation on the line, made one final attempt to justify his clearly discriminatory actions and save face. "I have the ultimate legal responsibility for the safety and security of 186 passengers on this aircraft. If I have any doubt whatsoever about a passenger's intentions, behavior, or potential threat level, based on my professional experience, based on what specific evidence?" Captain Morrison David interrupted firmly but professionally, his tone remaining completely controlled but unmistakably firm in demanding accountability. "I followed every single procedure without complaint, complied fully with every request made of me, and presented proper identification immediately when asked. Your alleged safety concerns appear to be based solely and exclusively on my physical appearance and racial identity." The Federal Aviation Administration liaison Maria Santos had arrived to conduct an immediate preliminary review of the incident, according to federal protocols. Strict FAA regulations required thorough investigation of any discrimination complaint involving active flight crew members, especially when the incident was comprehensively documented by multiple independent sources, credible witnesses, and video evidence from various angles. Riley's livestream had essentially become a virtual courtroom and public forum with engaged viewers from around the entire world weighing in on the proceedings through comments, shares, and reactions. Her natural teenage commentary provided crucial cultural context and emotional authenticity that helped international viewers understand the deep historical and social significance of what they were witnessing unfold in real time. Sarah Connor's crisis management team was operating in full damage control mode, but their efforts were severely hampered by the immediate real-time nature of comprehensive social media coverage and citizen journalism. Every carefully crafted statement they prepared was instantly fact-checked by thousands of online viewers with access to the same information, documentation, and video evidence from multiple sources. Frank Thornton addressed the growing crowd of passengers and media representatives with obvious emotion and moral authority. "This young man has handled this terrible situation with more grace, dignity, and professionalism than I've seen from some commanding officers during combat operations. If you can't clearly see the discrimination happening here, you're deliberately choosing not to look at the evidence right in front of your eyes." The airline's corporate response evolved dramatically throughout the day, as senior executives gradually realized the true scope of the crisis and its potential long-term impact on the company's reputation and bottom line. Initial attempts to minimize the incident and control the narrative gave way to reluctant acknowledgments of serious concerns and carefully worded promises of thorough internal investigation and appropriate corrective measures. Thomas Crawford announced that the pilots' union would conduct its own independent internal review of the entire incident separate from corporate investigations. The union's credibility and reputation were now at stake. In the court of public opinion and leadership recognized that protecting obvious discrimination would severely damage their relationships with airline management, other unions, and the general public. Captain Morrison's professional isolation became increasingly apparent as even his longtime supporters and fellow pilots began publicly distancing themselves from his actions. The evidence was too clear, the documentation too thorough, the witnesses too credible, and the public attention too intense for anyone to credibly defend his discriminatory behavior without damaging their own reputations. The dramatic climax came when David Richardson revealed the full scope of his corporate influence and decision-making power within the aviation industry. Richardson Holdings International wasn't merely a stakeholder or minority investor in the airline. They were the controlling interest, with David personally owning more than 43% of the company's voting shares and holding effective control over major corporate decisions, executive appointments, and strategic direction. "I want everyone to understand something important about this situation," David announced to the assembled crowd, media representatives and airline officials, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to boardroom authority. "I don't need to fire anyone today or make dramatic gestures for personal satisfaction. What I need to see is proper procedures followed consistently for all passengers, appropriate accountability measures implemented immediately, and genuine commitment to systematic change throughout this organization." Maria Santos from the FAA presented her preliminary investigative findings to the gathered officials and media representatives. The rapid but thorough investigation had uncovered a troubling pattern of inadequate diversity training, insufficient oversight of crew decisions, inadequate complaint procedures, and corporate policies that effectively protected and enabled discriminatory behavior while punishing employees who reported such incidents. Captain Morrison was formally suspended from all duties pending a complete investigation by both the airline and federal authorities. The suspension included immediate removal from all flight duties, mandatory comprehensive bias training, psychological evaluation, anger management counseling, and sensitivity training before any possible consideration of reinstatement active duty status. The airline issued a comprehensive public statement acknowledging systematic institutional failures and announcing immediate, measurable policy changes with specific timelines. These included mandatory bias training for all crew members, with annual recertification, enhanced passenger complaint procedures, with independent oversight, regular third-party audits of company practices, transparent reporting of discrimination incidents, and zero-tolerance policies for discriminatory behavior. Riley's livestream had reached over 100,000 active viewers, making it one of the most watched real-time discrimination incidents in aviation history and social media. Her spontaneous documentation provided crucial evidence for both internal corporate investigations and potential federal legal proceedings, while also serving as a powerful example of citizen journalism's impact. Frank Thornton was invited to address the crowd one final time before the situation concluded. "Today we witnessed what happens when people stand up firmly for what's right and refuse to stay silent. Not just Mr. Richardson, but everyone who refused to let this discrimination slide quietly into the shadows. That's exactly how real lasting change happens in America, when ordinary people do extraordinary things." The financial implications became clear as the airline's stock price stabilized following news of David's ownership stake and his measured professional response to the crisis. Investors appreciated his focus on systematic institutional change rather than punitive personal measures, vengeful actions, or costly litigation that could damage the company's long-term value and reputation. Thomas Crawford announced that the pilots' union would implement comprehensive new policies regarding discrimination and the appropriate use of crew authority in passenger interactions. The union leadership recognized that protecting inappropriate discriminatory behavior ultimately weakened their negotiating position and severely damaged their members' professional reputations and public standing. Sarah Connor's crisis management team began working on long-term reputation repair strategies rather than immediate damage control measures. The airline's senior leadership finally recognized that authentic, measurable change was far more valuable than superficial public relations, gestures, or temporary media management that would eventually be exposed as hollow. 3 months later, the comprehensive changes at the airline were both measurable and industry-leading, serving as a model for other companies facing similar challenges. David Richardson had strategically used his ownership position to implement some of the most progressive and effective anti-discrimination policies in the entire aviation industry, creating a framework that other companies began studying and adopting for their own operations. Captain Morrison completed extensive retraining and publicly acknowledged his mistakes in a videotaped statement that was distributed to all airline employees. While he eventually returned to flying after meeting all requirements and demonstrating genuine change, he never again held authority over passenger boarding decisions and surprisingly became an advocate for comprehensive bias awareness training throughout the industry. Riley Park's exceptional documentation of the incident earned her recognition from civil rights organizations, journalism schools, and social media companies nationwide. Her natural ability to capture and contextualize breaking news led to scholarship opportunities, mentorship from professional broadcasters and digital media companies, and invitations to speak at conferences about citizen journalism's power. Frank Thornton became an informal ambassador for the airline's new customer equality initiatives and diversity programs. His military background and unquestioned moral authority helped validate the company's commitment to change in the eyes of initially skeptical passengers, critics, and civil rights organizations monitoring corporate progress. The airline's transformation became a widely studied case study in corporate accountability, stakeholder activism, and crisis management in business schools. Universities across the country began using the incident to teach students about crisis management, corporate responsibility, the unprecedented power of social media documentation in holding institutions accountable, and the business value of genuine diversity and inclusion. Maria Santos's comprehensive FAA investigation resulted in industry-wide policy recommendations that strengthened protections for passengers and improved training standards. Federal authorities used the incident to strengthen anti-discrimination protocols, improve reporting mechanisms across all commercial airlines operating in the United States, and establish clearer guidelines for crew authority in passenger interactions. Jennifer Walsh received official recognition for her professional handling of an impossible situation under extreme pressure. The gate agent's quick-thinking, accurate documentation and calm professionalism helped ensure that the investigation had solid, unimpeachable evidence to work with throughout the process, and she was promoted to supervisor with additional training responsibilities. Thomas Crawford successfully led the pilots' union through a comprehensive review of their advocacy policies and member protection procedures. The union's willingness to prioritize justice over blind loyalty ultimately strengthened their credibility with both members and airline management, leading to better relationships and more effective negotiations. Sarah Connor's evolved crisis management approach became a template for handling discrimination incidents in real time across multiple industries. Her team's evolution from traditional damage control to authentic engagement demonstrated the importance of adapting strategies based on evidence, public sentiment, and moral principles rather than simply protecting corporate interests. David Richardson returned to his normal business activities but continued advocating for airline industry reform through his corporate influence and public speaking. His measured response to discrimination became a model for using privilege and power to create systematic change rather than seeking personal revenge or individual satisfaction, inspiring other executives to take similar stands. The Gate C-12 incident proved definitively that discrimination thrives in silence and shadows but crumbles completely under public scrutiny and comprehensive documentation. When people with privilege consciously use their positions to protect others rather than themselves, real and lasting change becomes not just possible, but inevitable and sustainable. What do you think about David's approach to handling this discrimination? Should he have used his corporate power sooner to prevent the situation from escalating, or was his patient documented strategy the right way to create lasting change that benefits everyone? Have you ever witnessed discrimination that you wish you'd spoken up about more forcefully, or do you have experiences with travel discrimination you'd like to share? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Box for more powerful stories about courage, justice, and the transformative power of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult.